was a day like never before. Alone on a hillside, I was on my father's farm, just me and my dogs, doing one of my favorite things, quail hunting. But things weren't right, and hadn't been for some time. I grew up in my parents' church, and as a dutiful oldest child, I regularly attended Sunday school and church. But when I joined the Army, got married, got out on my own, I quit going to church. I quit reading the Bible. I quit praying. You might say, I quit God. So there I was on that remembered day, looking up at a sky low and solid with clouds rushing from the north, as if their life depended on getting somewhere fast. While this was happening in the sky, the wind on the ground was blowing strongly from the opposite direction. Who could explain it? I had hunted and fished all my life. I grew up on this farm. Never had I seen clouds filling the sky so fast and low, and surface wind blowing the opposite way. What I was seeing and feeling was terrifying, awesome, filled with wonder. So much so, I thought of God. And in my loneliness and despair, in pain and anger, I shouted with my heart, "If you exist, I want to know." Instantaneously, not my ears, but my heart heard God's two-word reply. My heart heard. Then no.
We're merely breaking the surface of the story, because beyond those two words,
Trump announced the United States is going to withdraw from the Iran deal.
is where the details lie. And the only way to uncover the whole story
How is the White House responding?
is to dig deeper.
Quail are round, plump little game birds whose feeding habits and appearance are similar to that of a chicken. Quail will often walk to their feeding areas, pecking and scratching along the way. At night, quail gather to form a tiny circle, each quail head facing outward, its tail feathers touching the tail feather of the quail on either side. When a covey flushes, the birds come off the ground in a confusing rush, like 25 or 30 little brown bumblings exploding up out back in every direction. It can be, often is, difficult to select a target. My suspicion is that's exactly what God intended. For the bird hunter, there's a strong temptation to shoot into the middle of this whirling frenzy. Takes no small effort to refrain. Probably most bird hunters have shot too quickly more often than they care to admit. No, I have. Almost always the result is holes punched in the air, and dogs looking back with expressions ranging from disapproval and dismay to despair and disgust. Don't ask me how hunting dogs can convey such feelings, but they can. I even had a pointer named Rowdy pee on my hunting partner's leg. Rowdy's reason was that my buddy had made some disparaging remarks. Remarks that Rowdy and I both felt were unfair. Hunting quail provides so much satisfaction. It's tough knowing where to begin. I'll start with flavor. Quail are delicious, whether baked, roasted, smothered, or fried. Assuming one doesn't know about a platter full of frog legs with all the trimmings, there's no better supper anywhere, I say, than fried quail with biscuits and gravy. Boy. For supper, I like to fill up the edges with rice, too. Eating quail is mighty satisfying, but the excitement and challenge, the thrill and joy, the beauty is in the hunt. Imagine hunting dogs ranging in front, dogs whose noses are capable of winding quail, whether the quail are resting in a covey or scattered, feeding in a field. Imagine, as if by some invisible hand, a dog's head jerked sideways, the dog now following its nose. As the dog draws nearer, its approach will slow until the dog locks on point, frozen, like a statue, chiseled in stone. That's an amazing thing to see. The mystery and suspense of seeing bird dogs close on quail make those moments, perhaps those minutes, memories a bird hunter keeps forever. Now it's the hunter's turn. With gun at the ready, the hunter moves to the front and flushes the quail. Because quail are camouflaged so perfectly, a quail hunter can never be sure how many quail will rise. 1, 2, 3, perhaps a covey of 35. Unless the dog remains on point after the hunter shoots, there's no way for the hunter to know more birds are on the ground. When singles are being hunted, sometimes a whole new covey flushes. You can imagine the smile this puts on a bird hunter's heart. A bird dog's job is to wind, trail, point, hold, back, and retrieve game. Only when a bird hunter gives permission does a champion bird dog break point to continue hunting or retrieve. A bird dog that jumps or breaks point after a covey or single has flushed is a bird dog that hasn't learned its manners. Such a dog is aching for a breaking. The reason being, a dog moving too soon after quail have flushed may inadvertently cause other birds to flush before the hunter is prepared to shoot. Some bird dogs are like children who will do whatever is allowed. From the start, working with bird dogs requires a loving but firm discipline. As a rule, if words and kindness won't work, a whipping will. Picture open hardwoods, 50 or more quail scattered throughout, dogs ranging, pointing, and backing, the hunter with a vent rib over and under 20 gauge skeet skeet. I'm remembering. Pure pleasure. Hunting quail tests the reflexes and shooting skills of anyone. When a bird hunter consistently puts quail on the ground, sometimes dropping 3 or more birds on the rise, the quail hunter is very pleased, and no audience is needed whatsoever. Still, there's many a shot I'd like the world to have seen. Of course, there's an equal number. I'm glad they didn't. Earlier, I mentioned joy and beauty. The joy comes from several sources. When asked about the joy of bird hunting, most bird hunters will start with their dogs. A good bird dog is a partner, a true companion. No pointer or setter can speak the king's English, but I guarantee these animals have spirit, heart, intellect that make them a joy to know and accompany in the field. The bond formed between a bird hunter and his bird dog is special. When walking in the fields or in the woods with my 2 setters, Belle and Sue, wasn't like we were 3. It was more like We were one. Our communication more personal, more intimate, more in common than words spoken. And beauty. Imagine the leaves of Sourwood, Buckeye, and Shoemake. You'll see reds, yellows, and oranges of every description. And in the sky, colors constantly changing. There are the yellows, browns, and reds of plowed fields, the grays and tans of winter's woods and grasses. You'll see the greens of mosses, ferns, honeysuckle, water, and silver. The silver of light reflecting from water as it moves over rocks, logs, and shoals, and more. There's beauty of sound. The sound may be the rustle of leaves as a breeze moves through, or quail calling. The bobwhite has two distinct calls, its territory call and its gathering call, a piercingly high whistle that's easy for a hunter to hear and imitate. Other sounds come to mind. The drum of a yellow hammer, the tapping of a downy woodpecker, the trill of a meadowlark, the chirr of a fussing squirrel. My two favorites are the moan of pines as wind moves through, and the sound of water as it drips, trickles, and falls. Everything comes together to feed one's hunger. Now wait, there's the golden boy. You get him, friend. I'll bet you.
Again, I guess.
So Frank, there's a lot to pick apart in there. First of all, the equation he made between opposition research on a presidential campaign, which we see in every presidential campaign, every campaign ever, and a foreign
who can know the joy
perhaps by the foreign government
of a bird hunter?
Giving information. Are those two the
Part of it has to do with beauty.
Clear distinction, and
the season ends with beauty so breathtaking, seems almost sacrilege to attempt to describe. The orange of a February sun, the sky, a cobalt blue. It's like walking on a different planet. Trees in the distance, the field and fence rows, the forest floor and earth itself. You, me, our dogs, awash in orange, muted, soft, and mellow. I'm sure there is an explanation for how it all comes together to bathe in orange. Everything there is. I say, who cares? All I know is the sacredness of those afternoons. The quietness. It's like time has stopped. The Stormy Daniels
and
all
the disclosure came in the very last footnote on page 45 of the 92-page report. It claims, quote, in the interest of transparency, while not required to be disclosed as reportable liabilities, in 2016, expenses were incurred by one of Trump's attorneys, Michael Cohen.
Had someone taken me bird hunting when I was little, things would have turned out differently. But no one did. So starting out, when I went after quail, I went after them like everything else, flat out. This meant starting early. And I'm not talking about sunup, I'm talking about early. Because any quail hunter will tell you that on a clear day, quail move at first light. Tasty as quail are, the last thing a quail wants is to walk a flyer about in broad open daylight, no telling who'll see it make their day a bad one. No. Better to feed at first light. Feed quickly then fly or scurry back to thickets, brush piles, or the middle of the woods. Covey up, wait till time to feed again. Getting up in plenty of time to be before dawn where I would hunt, I knew the habits of quail, and early on met Bob White on his own terms. I'd be out of my truck before the crack of dawn to listen for quail calling at first light. The quail wouldn't call long, but long enough for me to get a fix or two on coveys to start my day. Packing food and water, plus food for my dog, I'd hunt almost at a trot, slowing only for thickets, briars, and dogs on point. Sometimes I'd stop to eat and drink from a goatskin bag, but usually I'd take my nourishment on the move. My dog's eating when I eat. Tough as wing leather. Back then I thought nothing of ending my day miles away from a truck. Sometimes I'd be dropping to my knees, putting flushing quail against light so faint, all I'd have is a second or two. Quick as the quail were, my 20 gauge was quicker. Hunting till dark and returning to my truck by moon and starlight, I walked satisfied and content. Took dogs with heart to hunt the way I loved. Seemed I always had them. I did have one handicap, however. My handicap was I never would accept the fact that when heavy frost, snow, or ice lay on the ground, quail had more sense than to be out and about walking around in it. I had cold-proof and waterproof boots and pants. Apparently, my thinking was, if I were willing to be out when it was wet and cold, quail ought to be willing too. Without success. I argued this way lifelong through. I remember right before sunup a morning with Billy Vaughn and his brother Ronald Gray. We were walking through an open field, our hunting dogs in front. Didn't seem